So big welcome to you all. I can see some clients, so great to see you, and also some partners and some of you that we haven't met before. But it's great to have you all on board. So let's kick off. I like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land and pay my respects to the elders, both past, present, and emerging. I'm really excited to be presenting this webinar today with my co-host, Alan Hinton. Hi, Alan.
Hello.
This is a great topic, and I know I always say that with our webinars, but look, I think it really is. I think there's a lot of value that I hope you'll receive from this webinar. And, you know, I was thinking about this, the less technically educated business leaders and some of the end users really expect that systems talk and automatically sync. But for those of us in the tech space, we know there's much more to it than that. And often there is a lot of manual data entry that's happening in the background. So let's get rid of that and look at how we can actually go ahead and sync and provision Active Directory. So let's jump into it. For those of you that don't know us, we are WebVine. We are specialists in the Microsoft technology and in digital transformation. And we love talking about these topics. So we also have, as I mentioned, a lot of great content for you today. It's going to be a jam-packed webinar. We're going to start by looking at the overview of Active Directory and the benefits of using HR data, and then we'll jump right into the how-tos of syncing your HR platform to Active Directory. We will have, as I mentioned, quite a lot of content, but we do like to give you the chance to ask questions. So we will have time at the end. And if you have questions during the webinar, please put them in the Q&A box and we'll make an effort to answer those questions at the end. We always love starting our webinars with a poll, so we can gauge where you're at in your journey with provisioning your HR platform. So here's 4 questions, and we'd really love you to respond to them. What is preventing your organization from connecting its HR platform to Active Directory? So we have 4 options there. 1 would be lack of expertise, 2, limited budget, 3, low priority, or 4, nothing, you're already in the process. So if you want to go ahead and don't be shy, come on, put your results in. I can see now, oh great, we're getting quite a few answers here. And this is great because anyone else want to respond? Okay, perfect. So the winner by 57% is lack of expertise. So that's great. So hopefully through this webinar, we're going to arm you with a bit more expertise and you'll feel a bit more confident to look at this as a project. Good. So thank you so much for that. All right. Well, countless studies have been done. McKinsey's done one, PwC, Microsoft, and they all recognize the significant benefits of a single source of truth and how that positively impacts the business. And of course, this makes absolute sense. And Oxford University took it a step further and honed in specifically on employee data. And so what they've stated is that accurate employee data leads to attraction, retention of talent, and improved decision-making and reduced error. And of course, that is so compelling, really. These are the compelling points for you to want to get your data clean and synced. You know, how much more reason do you need than that? So let's arm you with all you need to do to start this off. And I'd like to hand over to you, Alan, now for an overview of AD.
Excellent. Thanks, Chloe. So this is where we get into the nuts and bolts of it. It's really important that you understand Active Directory and you understand at a base level, and then we can then take you forward throughout all the different aspects of it. So without further ado, Active Directory, just to make sure I level set everyone in the room, because I don't know the different levels that you're at. So Active Directory, think of it as your digital identity. So when you log into your computer, that user ID and password that you type in, you know, that unlocks the world of access to different things within your organization. And it is effectively a database. It's a database of information about you. Now, it's very basic information, like name, address, etc. But what we're going to talk about today is that whole journey that you could go on that's going to marry all that up. So it is something that Microsoft provides, and it's something that typically, when I say Active Directory, there's a few different pieces to it. It's something that's going to sit inside your network. So it's in a server in the closet or in the server room somewhere. And it has all of that basic information about employees, as I said. Okay, and so that is Active Directory. And what I'm going to do is over the next few slides is talk about how that interacts with the rest of the world that you work. But as long as you understand it's a digital identity, has some basic information about you, like your user ID, your password, things like that, we can then take that forward. Okay, so that's the base level. All right. Now we're going to bring it a little bit more closer. So I've been talking a little bit about Active Directory, and I mentioned it's a server or something that sits inside of your office wherever you work. It's a server that sits in the server room or something, and that we call on-prem. And so Active Directory is on-premise or on-prem in your server room. Now, Microsoft, when they developed their cloud offerings that most of you probably already use through Microsoft Teams and email and things, they developed this solution that's in the cloud called Azure AD or Azure Active Directory. And so think of it like that database that I talked about in the last slide that has your username and password and other things in it, but now in the cloud so that you can access it from anywhere in the world. So when I use the word Active Directory, that's on-prem or on the network. Azure Active Directory is in the cloud, and that's what all the great Microsoft tools that you're probably using today use to be able to do a lot of different things. And there's abbreviations. AD is Active Directory. AAD is Azure AD. And what we're going to really talk about over this is the synchronization across those plus your HR platform. Now, as I mentioned before, there are certain fields of information that it knows about you, like and we call them user properties. And you can see them on the right-hand side here, some of them. This is just a snapshot, but they have your first name, your last name, your phone number, your department, your position within the organization. They have the capability to have all these, including manager, which is also a very important one. So these are all the little properties that go into your little record in the Active Directory database. And that gets then sucked up into Azure AD so that Microsoft in the cloud can use those. All right. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, because that's really important to understand that concept so that when we talk about the HR stuff, it's going to all come together into one constant place. Okay, and we'll go through that. So now that you kind of have a picture for what Active Directory is and what Azure Active Directory is at a very simple level, like we don't need to get into technology. Now we're going to go into the HR world, and please ask any questions in the Q&A as we go through, and I'll make sure that we answer all of them. All right. Okay. So moving on from there, now that you've got a little bit of an idea of AAD or AD, why would you connect your HR platform? So that's what we're here today to do, is to really talk about that. And there's a number of benefits, and here's just a few of these. And think of these as little nuggets that you're going to put in your business case, or when you're talking to your stakeholders, which we'll talk about later, you can bring up. Protecting data integrity, having that golden source of truth. I talk about that all the time. Having a good source of golden source of truth, really important. Data entries. You know, double handling this data is a big issue. Not doing it right, not doing it at all. You know, so it removes that. And if you connect these platforms together and put machines to make sure these things get all in sync, then you're going to have much less room for error. Tighter security. This is also, if someone moves from marketing to sales, then they should lose access to all their marketing systems and get access to all the sales systems. And that can happen automatically. So tighter security, saving time, productivity. Onboarding is such a big thing, you know, creating those accounts and all those systems and getting that all lined up Imagine if the first day you started, the system knew when you were starting and it provisioned everything automatically for you. So onboarding is a really big driver for this as well as offboarding, as well as moving around. And we'll talk about that. So just to reemphasize, I mean, we are bringing this back to the human element. And, you know, there is data about employees that are in different systems. I showed you some of that could be in your AD system. A lot of this data is actually in your HR platform, because as part of onboarding, they have to supply a lot of this information. So, you know, working with Beth's information and streamlining it through the process is paramount to the success of this. But it's not a simple process. This is not in it like you click your fingers and it's there. It actually takes a lot of work. And so the graph that I'm going to show you, the diagram I'm going to show you, is going to show you a level of complexity of this. And so we just picked an example here. We highlighted a popular HR system called Workday. You all have different ones, and they all have varying degrees of capability and integration and age. I was talking with a client this morning, a pretty big organization, and they have a HR system from 10 years ago. So, you know, you're going to all be on that journey. All right. And so this is the kind of complexity of this data, that potentially this data needs to go from your HR platform over here and move on this journey all the way into your Active Directory to then get back to your Azure Active Directory, to get back to the Microsoft database. And so all of these little steps have little widgets and controls and stuff that require consideration when you go through these projects. So knowing that it's complex, but knowing that it can be broken down and simplified, and we're going to explain a lot of that as we go. So don't worry too much about this. It can be broken down into achievable chunks, just time and effort. I have more to say, but I will hand it over to Chloe, and I'll come back to you in a bit. Over to Chloe. You're on mute, Chloe.
Thank you, Alan.
You're welcome.
I didn't want you hearing my background noise. There's a bit of thunder happening over here. Thanks so much for that. So I want to talk about 3 very compelling use cases. And we'll give you some examples that are focused on the intranet, but of course it could be via other communication channels like email. So the first one is targeting. So, you know, when you have clear information about your teams, there's really so much you can do. And targeting communications really makes communications so much more powerful and potent. So you can do that, for example, on your intranet. You can slice communications according to role or location, department, division, team, all based on Active Directory fields. Your staff directory becomes so much more powerful when it has those fields applied to them. So there's more accurate chance of search and providing you the right results. You can target events. So for example, you might want to invite specific project managers or leadership teams to a particular event just for them. And alerts, you know, perhaps the Melbourne office is impacted or the field staff need a particular alert that applies to them. So all of this is possible. The targeting really makes it very powerful. The next point, of course, is automation, and automation has been a buzzword for a few years, and it will continue to be until we get it right. So simple things can actually make a difference, like automating announcements for staff anniversaries or role changes. And then there's the more serious matters like the compliance, so trainings and attestation, and all of this can be automated alerts to particular users. What we're also seeing is highly valuable and really rewarding for staff is onboarding. So the data tells us who are the new employees, and then we're able to serve those new employees with relevant content to give them a great onboarding experience, whether that's a tour of an intranet, whether they get to see and highlight specific items from the intranet like CEO videos. Again, the attestation could be really important as well, or a security briefing, and then more of the social side or the professional in introduction side, so bringing them in to be part of the team. So all of this is possible when we've got the data right. So back over to you, Alan. How do we sync our HR platform into Active Directory?
Excellent, Chloe. Fantastic. All right. So the good news with this is that this is going to follow a very typical project cycle. There's nothing sort of unique about getting a project and getting this going. It's just the little pitfalls and the things that you got to think about along this journey. So, we've got a number of different steps here. And what I'll do is I'll go into some detail about each of these to give you a little bit of nuggets. So we're first going to start with identifying stakeholders. Your two main groups of people that you need to work on, IT and HR. Couldn't be different parts of the organization if you tried. But those are your two people, your two stakeholder groups that you really need to engage. Yes, you may, in big organizations, there may be risk and a security arm and all of that, and then that's fine. But at its core, those are your two groups, because IT own Active Directory and HR typically own your HR platform. So those are your two groups. Everyone else is kind of like hanging on. Those are your two groups. So you got to think about those two groups and how you tackle them. And typically, to be honest, HR is almost always on board. As long as it's not critical sensitive data, then HR is always on board, because they don't enjoy filling out the tickets to get those people's names changed or those phone numbers or da-da-da-da. They don't enjoy that. They despise that. So whatever can make their life easier, they do. IT, on the other hand, and no offense to the IT people that are listening on this call, I love you guys and girls, but you guys are usually the ones that have the, you want to see it more and understand it more, and rightly so, because that's the keys to the kingdom. The Active Directory is paramount for security in so many things. So rightly so, you've got to understand it and you've got to support it. So when you're thinking about IT, I mean, you guys, I know, don't like to enter this data. People telling you, later that someone's moved to this role, people giving you wrong information, incorrect. It's timely, it's annoying, it's just fundamentally routine. And so this is really going to help make that whole process really easy for you and hopefully eliminate it. That's really the goal. So when you're talking with IT, or if you are IT, these are your benefits. This is what's going to save you the time. You've obviously got to think about the security aspects and the security implications of having the golden source of truth be your HR system, because that is obviously a big deal. And because in old days, and still today in some organizations, the golden source of employee record is actually the Active Directory. And so there's constantly this challenge of having these. So it's going to save a lot of time for onboarding, error reducing. You can even put in approval processes. If you're worried about the systems changing without your knowledge, have an approval process that notifies you when something changes, and then someone literally goes and pushes the button to say, yeah, that change can happen. So there's a lot of little checks and balances that can be put in, but it will save all the IT time and effort and streamline this. So these are your things that are going to go into your business case, or your planning for how you can bring this across the line. So that's why a lot of focus is spent on talking about IT. Next up, scoping. You really got to define the scope of what you're trying to achieve here, especially if the data in either the HR platform or the data in the Active Directory system is not fully up to date and accurate. You've got to think about what is the actual scope. Like, is it just to literally connect the HR platform to your AAD or your Azure or your Active Directory? Or is it to do more? But writing that scope down and being very clear will help. Oh, we need to get this new system or nope, that's our scope. So having a very clearly defined scope can help manage all of that. Other areas that you got to think about is what's out of scope. Like, what are you not going to do? What you're going to do and what you're not going to do are equally as important. Okay, and so making sure you clearly highlight that is critical to the success of your business case and the project itself. licensing and prerequisites. Sometimes there are licensing implications depending on your HR system, depending on how connected your AD and your AAD are, you may need additional licenses. So this is where engaging with your HR partner as early as possible and understanding that, and engaging with your IT partner and getting them together and nutting it all out and working out the licensing, the cost implications, the time implications, all of that is very important. So that's a really important step in this process. What attributes are you going to synchronize? Great having these systems connected, but if you don't know which attributes you're going to work with, you don't know where they're coming from and what they're doing. And really, at the end of the day, what you're going to use them for. That's the most important thing. What are you going to use those attributes for dictates what your attributes you're going to sync, and then that flows down, because you don't want to sync the entire HR platform, right? In reality, you want to sync, and also if you think about minimizing the scope, maybe just picking one field, maybe a good start, and then coming back and picking more fields, because it's easier to put more fields in later than it may be to try and tackle them all at once. So that can be a thing to think about when you're thinking about what your scope is going to look like. Then mapping, solution mapping. You've got people that join the organization. I mentioned that before. You got people that move to different departments, different teams, get new titles, et cetera, get new managers, all of the moving stuff that goes on in the organization, and then the people that leave. So you've got to consider all of these scenarios when you're thinking about everything and how that all works and what you're going to do with that information. And then mapping, connecting it between AD and your HR system, both at a technical level and at a business level. So really bringing that together can be very crystal clear when you're saying, I want this to go here, because there are hundreds of fields in AD, and there are probably lots of fields in your HR platform. So you've got to just connect the dots, and that's working with your business analysts or whoever's going to take on the responsibility for that part. And then you're all about the architectures. This is where IT people like a good solution architecture. So having a nice little pretty picture that talks about the steps of the information and how it moves can be very powerful for putting together to having as an artifact for your project and for ongoing maintenance as well. And then user provisioning. So this is that concept of, well, if a new person starts in HR, in the HR platform, how does that get through to AD? And then into the other systems. So mapping that out and being very crystal clear on how that process work, and then doing a number of different testing, which we'll get into next. But that's a very important part to actually get the thing connected and live, and all the foundational, the prerequisites met, etc. And then into 7, 8, 9, and 10, it's all about testing it through a UAT or testing it with a small group. I would strongly recommend that you test it with a small segment, because organizations don't have usually test Active Directories or test Azure Active Directories. And so you may run into a fact of, well, you don't really have a full test platform to test it on. So this is where you want to think about thinking about small and keeping it short. And then piloting, making sure it works for 3 months, for example. If it works for 3 months, okay, let's turn it on and make it work. Or whatever IT, security, and audit are happy with is what you typically do, because the goal is get there. You don't have to get there in 1 month. You can get there in 6 months. You know, it's better to have it started than not have it at all. So you got to think about what makes everyone comfortable. And then 10 is all about report and monitoring. You need to make sure that the systems are working constantly. Last thing you want to do is the systems to fall down and you don't know about it for 3 months, and all of a sudden people's information's out of date. So it's really important that you monitor and you keep that going on a constant basis. And typically that falls to IT from the AD side, and it typically falls to HR and the partner, the HR platform to monitor that. But obviously with these projects, there are pitfalls. I highlighted a few of them as I was going, okay? And that, I want to highlight a few of them for you. So expectations, you know, getting those expectations of everyone under control, very important. Communicating with the employees or the stakeholders or the subject matter experts that they're going to be impacted, very important. I mentioned 1 month versus 6 months. Yeah, this is a big deal. It's got to be considered slowly and methodically because this impacts so many systems. So try not to set unrealistic expectations on deadlines and things like that, and keep it small. It's a very good way to do it. Now, let's say the system's gone live. Great. Okay, now what? Okay, there's definitely key things you have to consider after the synchronization's in place. What happens if people in culture HR take on new fields of information? What to do then? You want those things into Active Directory. You got to think about the process for that. Right? Maybe there are other systems like ServiceNow that want automatic user provisioning. Typically that would fall to IT, but you can think about it in terms of, well, how do we extend this great new thing we've got connected between the HR platform and Active Directory? How do we extend it to other platforms to, again, eliminate those duplicate users and stuff like that? Yeah, we all want single sign-on and stuff. Doesn't always happen in all systems. So thinking about that. So having controls in place. One of the biggest things we find is that when the HR platform changes their widgets and their connections and their APIs and stuff, the sync can fail. So staying on top of how that HR platform is updating its systems so that you can avoid that going forward. So those are some of the things. Regular reviewing of the information that's going into these fields. Having an accountable team, one HR person and one IT people form a strong tangent that they're responsible for keeping the systems up to float, keeping the systems up to going. Now, some of you may be thinking, what if I have no budget? I don't have any budget. I don't have any, Well, there is a hope for you if you don't have any budget or whatever. You can think about a manual process. That maybe there's a manual person in HR that gets a little higher access. They're responsible for keeping that information up to date. So when an employee changes in the HR system, someone goes in and manually updates it. Do that for a while. Pretty soon you're like, wow, this is easy. IT's loving it because they don't have to do anything. And it's great. Or they're updating a text file that's getting imported, anything. And then pretty soon it's like, oh, we're loving it. Okay, well now we've proven that this is something we should do. Now we've got put up a business case, say we're already doing it, we just want it manual, automatic. So it's a very important aspect. So you can achieve this, but it's going to require some manual work to demonstrate the power of this. So that's just a little nugget. Last but not least, HR platforms, especially a lot of the cloud platforms, have already developed some of these quick ways of getting connected and integrated. And they've developed lots of information about this. And so here are just some examples like SuccessFactors, Workday, Cloud HR. They all have stuff on how you can do this. So this is a well-trodden path. So you've got some resources here. There's also a Microsoft Azure space that actually has user provisioning like ServiceNow or SuccessFactors. They already have this stuff. And so if you go to these links, they will give you tutorials and information to get you started. So you can actually do it, get a head start on this. And there's a whole SaaS solution gallery and everything on this. So there's lots of different ways. This is a well-trodden path. You just need to do it, and you got to think about how you do it within your organization because every organization is different. Excellent, everyone. Wonderful. I'm going to hand you back to Chloe.
Thank you so much, Alan. Wow, you did a great job presenting all that content so quickly. Thank you so much. So we do have time for a bit of questions in a second. We did cover a lot of content today. We talked a bit about Active Directory and defined what it is and gave you an overview of Active Directory and AAD. And we also talked about the use cases and why this is so important and what benefits you can derive. We looked at the practical how-to in syncing your HR platform to Active Directory and discuss some of the pitfalls and ongoing operational management. So, I hope that's been a really valuable insight into this topic. If there are any questions, please post them in your Q&A. We're coming up to time. Geez, that 30 minutes flies by. But we do have one or two questions. So let's just open them up.
Do you want to take it, Chloe?
Oh, okay. So the question, I'll let you know the question, Alan. Thanks, that was great. What are the security benefits to syncing the platforms versus manual uploading?
The difference is just effort. So if you don't mind doing the manual uploading of the data, then that's great, because some HR systems can provide you a file on a daily basis. Like, here are the here is the deltas, the changes, or here's the whole thing now uploaded. So the only difference between the two is the effort involved. Like, if that person goes on holiday that would normally do it, the frequency, you can sync this stuff every night, for example. So even, or all, every hour if you really wanted to, so, it's purely the effort and the frequency of how current you want to do this, especially if you have downstream processes that depend on this stuff, actioning quickly. The moment you put someone in charge, then they'll not, well, number one, they won't like to do it because it's boring and really a useless waste of their time generally. But purely, it's just a how frequently do you want the systems to be up to date? Because then when someone's in the intranet world, when you're looking up a phone number or looking up a name or someone in a department, that can happen every day, all day. Okay, and if that information is not accurate because the person's gone on holidays for 2 weeks, then they're not going to get the correct information and they're going to not enjoy what they're trying to do. So we're sending a leave request through a workflow process, and that manager just left, that kind of stuff. So
I guess the only other thing would be if there is significant manual intervention, then there of course is the risk of human error.
Yes.
Which is avoided if you might be doing an automated syncing process. We do have another question. What businesses are early adopters and what businesses benefit the most?
Great question.
Any thoughts on that, Alan, from what you've seen with our clients? I mean, as you can see, what we talked about, there is, vast benefits, particularly from communicating with your team's point of view and the ability to sharpen your communications and to target, as we talked about, and particularly when you get more sophisticated with automation of processes, and this can certainly add an extra layer of sophistication to that. So there's definitely a lot of benefit around that. And who have we seen as the early adopters with this?
Well, it's interesting, Chloe, because technically this stuff has been around for a very long time. So there are no early adopters. There's just everyone that's actually late to the party. So there's no such thing as an early adopter, really, because everyone has some level of HR systems and they all have Active Directory, Azure Active Directory. So they're actually all late adopters, really just trying to catch up. And the pain of the systems have become too great and too an impact in the organization. So really, it's actually size of organization that dictates a lot of this stuff. The bigger you get, the more important this becomes. So I'd argue anyone over 100 people is something you need to strongly consider having the integration, because then you're going to actually have an IT person, which is actually not their job, not really should be their focus of entering and changing information like this. So it's actually size of organization, and all organizations that are of a certain size will benefit from this capability. And yeah, that would be my view on it.
Great. Thank you so much. So we have gone over time, but I did promise that I'd answer questions. So thank you again for your participation, and really wanted to thank you, Alan. There was a lot of content there, and you delivered it so well, and we really appreciate that. We've helped a lot of our clients. Pardon? And you did it in a cafe. You did it. That was amazing. We've helped a number of our clients with this, and we'd be very happy to help you as well if you have issues with this or you want to discuss it further. So please do reach out. We'd be happy to have a chat. Thank you for your time. Wishing you a great rest of your Thursday and the rest of the week. And thank you so much. Goodbye.